The interesting thing with Penn State this year. I mean, they played once on the road, and that was the Wisconsin game, and won that 16-10. Probably should have lost that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm glad they won, but yeah.
but and Wisconsin has proven to be not a very good football team this year.
And Auburn, let's be honest, Auburn almost lost to Georgia State. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how much you can play this hodgepodge of putting games together and trying to figure out a final equation, but I think the verdict is somewhat still on Penn State. I mean, Indiana, we want to think Indiana's better than they appear because, of course, Iowa had, beat them, but Indiana hasn't. I mean, they barely slipped by Western Kentucky and have lost every other significant game on their schedule so far.
And they Penix got hurt in that last game too, and it sounds like he's done or might be done.
So we're going to see Tuttle in for them, but yeah, it's sort of derailed in Bloomington. So I don't know. I guess we can kind of get to this game now. We've kind of reflected on the past, and of course we know that Iowa is going to force turnovers. I think Sean Clifford, although he's playing better, and you talked about, he might be the best in the Big Ten. I think last week there was claim for Tagovailoa on that note that potentially he was best in the Big Ten, and Iowa didn't make him look like best in the Big Ten. But Clifford has not been great. I know Mark Rogers and myself both feel the same way on Sean Clifford. I'm not a real big fan of his. Never really have been. And maybe it's because he was filling some pretty big shoes. Trace McSorley was a huge overachiever, in my opinion, just given his size and maybe lack of athleticism. But he got it done there. Certainly got it done against Iowa. Helps when you have Saquon Barkley behind you, but I've never been a huge believer in Sean Clifford. So, Tom, what do you see as far as what Iowa can take advantage of with Sean? They like to throw the ball downfield, and they don't have much of a running game right now.
Yeah. They've got Kane back now, so he's a pretty good back. He was well respected. Dawson's really good. I think their season just kind of got derailed last year once Micah Parsons kind of decided.
That's true. I forgot about him going down. Yeah.
That's what I just kind of remember of last year is just, it seemed like once Micah Parsons opted out, and rightfully he should opt out because.
So he opted out for some reason. So that's what I was going to ask you. He opted out. He didn't get hurt. He opted out because of COVID.
Yeah. He just didn't.
Okay. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't want to play that year. And I'm not going to blame him.
Jaimin Colbert made the same decision last year.
Yeah, he made a business decision. And based on what I've seen from what he's done with the Dallas Cowboys, he made a very good decision.
Yeah.
Really good. But yeah, one of the things that I always look at, because I'm, kind of a degenerate, is I look at the gambling line and the guys that I know who put the lines up out at Circus Sports in Las Vegas, opened it as a pick'em, and it moved to Iowa 2.5. And the only people who are betting those lines at that point are the smart guys, the guys who are looking for an advantage. Joe Public is not weighing in. So
yeah,
that just tells me that that there's people who really like who do this for a living, do the gambling for a living. That they're the people that I'm paying attention to here.
And so, you're going to have the crowd. You're going to have Big Noon there, and Bob Stoops and Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and those guys, and that'll, I think, be great. I don't. For
the way, I joke that Kirk Ferentz probably quietly did a little fist pump when he found out that game day wasn't coming.
Yeah, why not? Well, I mean, why do you want him there? I mean, we've already had the. Well, I guess I wouldn't have the experience in names, but there's no reason for it. I mean, I don't think these. Again, maybe I'm biased here, but I feel like these guys are pretty level-headed. I look at a guy like Matt Hankins, who I thought he got lazy on a play last week, late in the game on the pass interference in the end zone. But he's had very few of those plays. Sometimes and again, this is just my vantage point. In past years, when Phil's had one of his staple defenses, at times the secondary gets exposed. Usually one of the two corners gets exposed, and it's been Hankins. I think back to, was it 2017 or 18 when he was pulled from the Purdue game. There have been times where he has gotten lazy, and I think it could be very easy to do that this year, given the experience. And I mean, obviously this defense is solid everywhere, but he's been pretty, minus that one play last week, he's been pretty level-headed. And I think that kind of, at least so far, that's kind of encapsulated what we've seen. I mean, they've had some, you think of the first game against Indiana, a lot of hype around Penix and that Hoosier team. Then you have to go to Ames, college game days there, all this playoff hype around Iowa State. You got a quarterback who has never started.
History.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they kind of run into a couple scary games. Kent State and Colorado State kind of push them. And then they respond on a short week on the road across the country. They've just had some different situations. I don't see Big Noon being there. I don't even think if College Game Day were there, it would really phase this team. I could be wrong on that. I just don't think they care.
Yeah. And we should point out, I was talking to Chuck Long about this today when we were doing his podcast, and just, this is the biggest, just in terms of rankings, nothing else, just rankings. Biggest game since the 1 versus 2 in 85.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chuck was the quarterback in that game. So I asked him, I go, what advice would you give Spencer Petras? And he just kind of said, just not, you're going to get a lot of people patting you on the back in campus, and just kind of go about your business. Don't try to, spend too much, just kind of get away from all that stuff. I think that was his message. So, it's a giant game. I mean, because if Iowa wins this game, they're going to be in the prime position for the college football playoff. They just are, until they lose. They're going to be listed every week until they lose as one of the 4 teams going to the college football playoff.
And I think, Tom, if they win this weekend, there's a good chance they'll be favorites in every game, minus maybe Wisconsin, because it's on the road, depending on what they do. But don't you think they'll be favorites?
They might even be a favorite against Wisconsin, depending on what happens with Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. They're probably going to be favorites in every game the rest of the way. It'll be interesting to see what that Nebraska team's doing. Is Nebraska turning a corner? Yeah. Will that game
look a lot better? Yeah.
Will that game in Lincoln?
Scary game. Yeah.
Will it become or will we look at Michigan, Nebraska this weekend and go, oh, okay, there's Nebraska again. That's the Nebraska we know and love.
Well, Tom, I'll just say this. My preseason predictions, I had Iowa at 9-3. I had them winning the West, and I do not do that every year, for the record. I had Iowa winning the West, but I had them with 3 losses, 1 to Iowa State, 1 to Maryland, and 1 to Northwestern. Now, I had switched that pick against Maryland last week based on what we'd seen. I thought they had Iowa's full attention. Of course, They've gotten past the Iowa State and Maryland games now. I'm not afraid of Northwestern. That game, to me, there's no question. If they played it today, I'd pick Iowa by probably 20. And that might be actually giving more credit to Northwestern than they deserve right now. I mean, just completely destroyed against Nebraska. They're terrible. Yeah. Which is odd. I always am nervous about counting Pat Fitzgerald's teams out, but man, I don't know how you recover from what they're doing right now. So, I look at the schedule left. I'll tell you, Nebraska, absolutely. I've been saying that. I said that Friday night. We had a lot of people calling in and saying, well, I think that Iowa, they're going to run the table. They're going to be a play. Pump the brakes, because Nebraska looks good. And let's remember, even the bad Nebraska teams play Iowa close, typically, minus like 2017. And there might have been, even 2015 was a fairly close game. So,
yeah, that 15 game was fairly tight at halftime.
Yeah.
It was a tight game, and Kanzeri hit a big run early, I think, in the second half, and that kind of gave Iowa some breathing room. But that was not.
It was.
That was a skating rink game too. Oh man,
yeah,
it was just yikes.
That was also a game, I believe, Kirk Ferentz got a sideline penalty because he threw his headset, and that was a weird game. Yeah, I've not seen Kirk is so upset about a play. Usually a level-headed guy, obviously. But yeah, as far as games left, Nebraska, and I'll tell you another game that scares me, partly because of timing, Tom, is that Purdue game in a week. Because it's right after the Penn State game. Purdue's got 1 loss in the Big Ten to a Minnesota team they probably should have beaten. And here's the deal. Let's remember, Iowa's first loss last year was to not only Purdue, it was to Aiden O'Connell at Purdue.
Yeah.
And we know Iowa has problems with David Bell. They have not been able to defend David Bell in any game yet. So, obviously they're more equipped to do that this year with Hankins and Moss. You're going to throw Belton on him, I'm sure, at times, depending on the formations. I think Iowa's more equipped to handle him. But that game is always weird. And it's a weird time right after the Penn State game. You don't want to let down. You're going into a bye week after that. Now, the good news is Purdue's down. Are they still down the big kid that burned them last year on the ground? Xander Horvath. Yeah, are they still down him? Is he out?
I don't know. Let me see if there's any updates over on Purdue.
But yeah, because last I had heard he was out.
He was going to be out for a couple of weeks. Yeah, he was there. Mark Wiseman. He was. Yeah.
Oh, he ran through Iowa last year.
He ran through Iowa like a hot knife through butter. Did he leap over? Was it Hankins?
He looked like Superman. He looked like Superman in that game. And of course, let's remember, Iowa was also down Seth Benson, Jack Campbell, Jaimin Colbert. So they were young. I don't even know who'd they play at linebacker. Barrington Wade and who else?
Justin Jacobs was out there a lot.
Man, Barrington Wade was old, but that was a very young or inexperienced linebacking core. So, do you see anything on Horvath moving forward?
Yeah, I don't see any injury update, but I can.
Last I had heard, he was out and for an indefinite period of time.
It seemed like he was going to be out for a while, and David Bell has been out a little bit.
But he did play last week, I believe, and had over 100 yards.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's back to doing what David Bell does, even with a mediocre team around him, at least.
I'm just reading some stuff. Jeff Brom says that Horvath is making progress, but it might be a couple weeks after the bye. So I think their bye is this week.
This week, yeah. So let's hope he doesn't have a quick recovery. I mean, I don't want to sound morbid, but certainly that would complicate things. So
it doesn't sound like he's going to play against Iowa.
So Tom, we're coming up to an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time here, but let's talk about as far as predictions. You care to make any final score predictions, or do you? I don't know if you have a Patreon page or you save these for your viewers later in the week. So if you don't want to make a final score prediction, that's fine. But do you have any?
I believe Iowa's going to win, and I think they're going to cover. I think they're going to win by 6-7 points.
So how many points? How many points does Iowa score then?
I think they're probably going to score 24. So like 24-17, something like that. I think that's going to be our final. And it's going to be wild. But
I'll just say this. This is what I'll say, and I'll have my weekly picks later on my channel on YouTube. But later this week, I will say this: I'm picking Iowa. I think, given the home field advantage, given what we saw last week, I still have a lot of questions about Penn State's rushing attack. I think Iowa proved last week that they can defend that downfield attack that Maryland touted out, and certainly Penn State does as well.
Yeah.
I do question whether Iowa can run the ball. We saw them run the ball effectively for a good portion of Friday's game, but I could very well see the game on Saturday being a 2 to 2.5 yard per carry type of game for Iowa's offense. And if that happens, all bets are off. Now, the good news is, like you said, Iowa's proven now that, and I don't know how much success you can have with this, but even when you don't run the ball effectively, Spencer has shown the ability to kind of break things open by getting that ball down the field and getting the air under the ball. So I have faith they'll be able to do that because Penn State's run defense is elite. I would be surprised if this is a high scoring game. Didn't think Maryland was going to be a high scoring game, but certainly Penn State's defense is more formidable and certainly has a better reputation than Maryland does. I'm not going to make any score right now, but I don't see this game going into the 30s on either side. Yeah,
it would have to have some of the weird stuff happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The
block punt, right? Block punt. So I guess it could be Von Valkenburg. Who do you see blocking a punt or a field goal this year? Who's lining up? Is it Shannon? I saw Shannon got close last year. Last week. Noah got real close. I believe it was on a punt.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they have an Adrian Claiborne to bust through the line
I
like
don't
they
think
did.
there's going to be any craziness this week, but yeah. I could see some interceptions though. I could see, Phil's they're designing stuff in that back end that's just they're confusing the heck out of people and disguising their coverages
and Sean Clifford will make mistakes. We saw it last year against Iowa. He will make mistakes.
Yep, you just got to bait them into the mistakes.
Yeah.
And they set the trap last week for Tunga Viola, and they're going to set another trap this weekend. We'll see if they make it 5 of 6 knocking quarterbacks out.
Man, they do that. Yeah, they do that. The playoff talk might be warranted. So, Tom, I appreciate the time this week.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. And
awesome, Corey.
Yeah, let's hopefully we'll be chatting very soon about an Iowa victory against Penn State, and if that happens, we're having a whole new discussion about November